viewers and friends, welcome to another episode of Trivial Objections. Once again, I'm your host, Jared. Today we've got some regulars, Danny, Adam, and Nate. Today we're just going to have an interesting little discussion. I came up with a little bit of a game, I guess you could say. And this game is the what if game, I call it. So today, each one of us has a typical what if question. So the others don't know what it is, and I'm going to go around and we're just going to ask the question and discuss it. How does that sound, guys? Good?
Sounds
Yeah.
great.
All right. So I'm going to start with something a little... unless someone else wants to go first, but I'm going to start with mine. So I was watching this movie on Netflix the other night. I want to say it was... I forget the name of it, but basically the premise of it was the Earth was running out of... Well, in the movie, the Earth was running out of energy. And so they were going to run out of energy in 5 years. And they built this space station to like create this particle accelerator to like create energy out of nothing and trying to like save the human race. My question is not that deep, but what if all of the experts in the scientific industry just said, guys, in 5 years we're going to run out of all of our natural resources and we got to do something to stop it. What would be the first thing that you would do in that situation? And to follow up, what should we collectively do as a human race to try and survive this crisis?
Man, I can't say. I can tell you what I think would happen is I think people would just start killing each other. Like, I think with like the kind of philosophy that we've gone on with the past almost 100 years, this kind of postmodern idea, I think people are just like, it's become more of a, it's us versus them mentality. And I think people would literally just start killing each other so that we had more resources to go around. Overpopulation, whether you believe it or not, is such a big thing right now. And that would just contribute more to that. And so for all the resources to go around, I think people would just start killing each other. I don't know what I would do right off the bat anyway.
So first of all, the very first thing that would happen would be the politicians would deny whatever the scientists are saying. And then there would probably be some feuds over resources, but I don't think it'd be like any type of massacre or anything like that. But I mean, there's so many renewable resources that to be able to say that all resources are going to be gone is kind of outlandish in my opinion. I think that no matter what, like whenever we have a need or a need arises, something comes along that fulfills that need. I mean, nuclear is a huge source of energy. Wind,
True.
Wave, solar. Like we have so many alternatives that I can't really imagine having an energy crisis that would.
Let's just say, for argument's sake, that all of our natural resources, so excluding like water and like the wind and the solar, but all of our oil, all of our metals, all of our minerals, we deplete the earth basically. So we would have to either, really enhance our technologies with solar and wind and whatnot, or we would have to, in my opinion, we would have to explore space more. And I think that would be it would be more of an emphasis on that. I tend to agree that there will be violence, but not on the scale that it'll end the world. I feel like the countries that are richer and that control the energy the longest will be targeted. So, for example, say like a country like, let's just throw out Kenya, for example, just say they in this crisis that they found a energy source that is like unrivaled, and it could just save us. Do you think that the stronger countries would try and like impose their will militarily to try and get that, or do you think we try and broker like some sort of
Real quick, how
agreement?
much do you think the world's energy is renewable? What percentage?
I don't know, but this is a hypothetical question. So, but
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know. Is the sun going out? I'm trying to get into the spirit of it.
eventually, I don't know.
So we're imagining a scenario where the sun is dying enough that we can't have solar, and nuclear energy doesn't work.
Mhm.
Then, yeah, I guess there. I mean, obviously, yeah, war would break out, and we'd fight over what the remnants are. That, or we'd have to spread out to space and try to mine asteroids and comets.
Yeah, I was kind of humoring the idea. I don't know, just like a panic of like all the resources somehow, somehow, some crazy way, all the resources that we could use, even renewable ones, would be gone, and the planet. Yeah, I don't know, but like if we're talking like we'd still have renewable resources, I think that I don't think you'd see like dystopian societies necessarily. It'd be in the eye of the beholder, but I think that like governments would definitely start cutting off accesses to certain areas and only like I couldn't go walking around in certain parts of the woods, right? That would be, only the government could go in those areas and so on and so forth. And that would be for the entire world. I think you'd see a lot more like unity in the world. I think like if it came to it, like I think that countries would probably start consolidating and protecting each other more, because I do think that like certain countries would attack other countries and try to get the resources like we do with oil nowadays. You know what I mean? But I think it would, if it was that on that dire of a scale, then yeah, because while you can like invest more in technology, if things that we use now to power our technology aren't going to be, or to further our technology, then if we can't use those resources, then you're going to really have to consolidate everything. So I think that they would make a lot of hands off, a lot of areas and a lot of resources that we have access to now, hands off, and just kind of expect the government to dole them out as they need to, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. That there'd be more control on and more restrictions on our freedom, I think, because we got to conserve, stuff. How viable is it, Tanny? I feel like you're kind of in like the know on this one, but like we're obviously trying to make renewable energy, but how close are we to that being a reality where all of our energy is renewable and we don't have to worry about this? Do you have any insight on that at all?
Yeah, a lot of it hinges upon discoveries in nuclear. We're getting a lot closer to that. Just most of it's just creating a magnetic field that's strong enough and stable enough to maintain and contain the reactions that are happening within a nuclear reactor.
Okay.
And once that is successful, then it'll be a matter of years before that's all of our energy. But as far as like the complete combination of energy, like we're already at like around 25% of renewable energy in the world.
And we could be more so, correct? We just haven't developed the infrastructure for that. We don't have enough solar panels and enough wind turbines, yada yada.
Yeah, I mean it could be way more. By 2050, I imagine it'll be the majority, at least, if not 75% or so. But
what's the biggest obstacle now? Just politics, basically, or is it just like money
efficiency, really?
Yeah, or efficiency? Okay.
Yeah, efficiency and politics a little bit. That's less so now. All the other resources have a huge infrastructure to it. A lot of the renewables are intermittent, which means they're not constant. Like wind isn't constantly blowing, sun isn't constantly shining. Geothermal is a really good one that they use in a lot of Scandinavian countries, but it's not everywhere.
Yeah,
correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the big issues we're finding right now is that we don't have the battery power to
batteries all of the. Batteries are also a big issue, but that technology is going up
to
quite a bit as well.
Yeah, for sure. Isn't
So
that?
can I?
That's why grid systems are so important.
Yeah.
So just like this is a little off topic, kind of, but like Danny, so you seem knowledgeable about this, and you said you played Fallout, right?
Right.
So in the lore of Fallout, what they did was like when we started investigating space in the space race, like we like all of our focus became on how to get to space. And within like 10 years, we went from no idea to getting to the freaking moon. And so like do you think that like if we would have instead of focusing on the technology we have today, because in Fallout the lore is that instead of focusing on the technology we have now, they focused everything on nuclear. And so like they had super old computers, but nuclear powered everything.
Yeah, I believe in this weird thing of like group consciousness and group effort. Whereas the more people are thinking about a thing, there's a kind of web of consciousness that all of humanity kind of experiences that causes eureka moments, basically. Like during the World Wars, whenever everybody was looking into nuclear bombs, and then all of a sudden one person had a eureka moment, and like simultaneously across the globe, all of a sudden everyone kind of had that same moment because everybody was working so hard on getting those bombs developed. And so everybody was thinking about it, and it was just, like you said, a worldwide effort. And then we made all these major discoveries. Same thing with space whenever the space race was happening during the Cold War. And I think that if it did turn to nuclear fusion and energy scarcity, the same type of eureka would happen.
Okay. So
a lot of human consciousness and like creativity is spurred by
I think
the need.
need is huge. Whether it's a war or whether it's a crisis, that's.
And I would argue that it's the creativity and stuff isn't spurred by that, but it's endorsed by that.
It's got more support during those
Yeah,
times.
it's got more support. People are throwing more money into it.
It's kind of a catalyst.
Yeah, it's a catalyst. That's a great word. So, I don't know. I just thought I'd bring that up because it could potentially be a real thing, especially now. I also want to, with our huge boom in population, we're consuming energy at such an alarming rate. Can we like make it up? Basically, is our trend going, towards? Is it going fast enough to catch up to our growing population?
I want to pause and say that population isn't booming right now.
Yeah, I agree with Nate.
How so?
The more recent generations have slowed down the baby making process a whole bunch.
Very much so.
True.
Yeah, we're like
but
most
comparatively
countries.
To what though? Like comparative to like 5 years ago or 10 years ago or comparative to 100 years ago?
If you just look at like the data for growth, like how they calculate whether a country is growing or not, most developed countries are actually shrinking. Mm-hmm. They have negative growth.
So more people are dying than are being born.
Yes.
Like most countries, so like Russia started paying women to stay at home and to have babies, literally because
Canada does the same thing. So does
lots.
Japan.
I mean, the U.S. isn't quite there yet, but it's getting to the point. But a bunch. That's why China got rid of the certain amount of kids rule, because you're starting to see an upside down pyramid where at the top is all the elderly people, all the baby boomers that are getting older, and then under that there's not enough kids to support them now that they're older. And you're going to start seeing that more and more as time goes on. So if you make it through that, you'd be okay probably, but there's definitely not enough kids to support the generations from above as of right now anyway. It's beginning to be a huge problem in the world.
You need growth in order to have a stable country, and which is unsustainable in the long run unless we expand. But for the next 100 or more years, we need to maintain that growth, or else we're going to have issues like China's about to be having.
Cool. All right. Love that discussion. I want to bring it up in future, get a little more in depth with it. But let's move on to the next question. Who wants to go with their what if question?
Adam, why don't you go ahead?
Man, I was tossing around a few, but I guess it's kind of related, kind of not, but what if we didn't invest everything we had into making the technology that we had today, what do you think the world would look like, right? So like I was kind of talking about the Fallout universe. Instead of, in Fallout, basically, instead of, investing little bits of everything that we had, all of our efforts and stuff into what we do today. So we have, technology is kind of going at it, a faster rate now, but like we have AI, we have certain technologies, we have living spaces, we have certain resources, we have high-end computers, high-end cars, those kinds of things. In Fallout, they put everything they had into nuclear energy. So the technology itself seems kind of dated, right? It's in the year 2077. They have super old computers. They don't have like cell phones, and they have super old recording systems. But the world itself may have been a bit further. What do you think the world would have looked like if we didn't have, maybe not the industrial revolution, but the technological revolution? What would we have invested in instead, and what do you think the world would look like? Would it be a better place? Would it be a different place?
It's, in my opinion, the technological innovation started with microprocessors. And that's whenever everything just started getting smaller. That's why computers and cell phones and all of our technology is small nowadays. And a lot of times you see in the Fallout universe, for instance, everything is large because they didn't invest in the processors. And we could have stuff just as powerful, but none of it would be space efficient. So first of all, everything would be huge if we didn't go through that revolution. But it's hard to speculate. Any little thing that we focused on could have changed everything. Just like a microprocessor made everything small. Nuclear energy made floating robots. Maybe we focused on like green technology, and instead of all this concrete everywhere, everything's made off of like bioengineered materials. So imagine like everything around you is bioengineered, made out of like natural synthetic spider silk and weird strains of wood and everything else like that.
Okay, let me kind of rephrase the question, paint a picture. So let's say that for some reason the technology we have now leads to the end of the world for some reason, and someone goes back in time and says, "Hey, I'm from the end of the world," and to when we started even making, right at the Industrial Revolution, and said, "Hey, starting this is going to kickstart, the end of the world. So no vehicles, no air conditioning, no any of that." What do you think the world would look like? I guess if everything, how do I explain it? Do you think that we would also have had the kind of intellectual awakening that people say that we had? Do you think that, how different do you think the world would look? Obviously, we wouldn't be able to communicate the same way. What do you think would have come in its place? Do you think anything would have, or do you think that technology was the next step of evolution?
I would say common sense would say we would go into another dark age. Just the same, no innovation. There was, you're pretty much saying no progress.
Right. Well, so that's my question is, do you think that we would have had no progress, or do you think that we would have, I don't know. I guess it's kind of a strange question, but
purely mentally?
Yes. Do you think we would have had progress mentally in a different way? I mean, do you think that we would have gone back to, so like the Egyptians were obviously they incredibly smart. We still don't understand half the stuff that they did and half the stuff they made in the way that they thought, but they were clearly incredibly smart. And there's a lot of people that say that they were smarter than we are now. And
well,
so do you think
I think that a lot of times people back then individually were a lot more intelligent than we are individually. And the reason why that we are so successful as a civilization is the way we communicate and how we communicate and think as a group.
How we collectively think instead of individually, because now we can collectively think. Like I can post something on the internet and some random can answer it, and this person will give a different opinion. But back in the day, you pretty much relied on your family and maybe your circle around them, and then that was it. You didn't have access to anything else. So I don't think they were smarter. I just think they were the same as us. They just weren't as informed, and they had to rely on more themselves to learn things. And it took them longer to learn things because they just relied on a set group of people instead of basically we have access to the entire world on the internet. So we have access to so many more minds and ideas and stuff. which I think that would kind of move us to, if we didn't have this technological revolution, then we'd still be kind of going down that same path. I feel like to go back to last episode, we'd be very still more collectivist in like the society, because we would have to be, because we would have to rely on those around us instead of being the individual and finding out those things for ourselves. So I don't know, just my observation.
Oh, that makes sense.
I don't know. I think that we need progress because otherwise you get stagnation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think stagnation leads to another dark age.
Yeah.
I kind of agree. I was just curious, and it was a poorly phrased question, I think.
Yeah. Progress is good. Progress is definitely good. We saw what happened when there wasn't progress, and I don't know. Maybe that's the way of things. Maybe we will hit a ceiling here eventually, and we won't find out what that next frontier is of like what we should discover, and we'll just be the same for centuries. Who knows? It's a great philosophical question. All right. We got two of you left. Danny or Nate, did you have a what if scenario or question that you guys wanted to talk about?
I misinterpreted the what if thing, so no, I do not.
What what were you planning on talking about then?
I was gonna bring in Freudian slips and a discussion of what we think they are.
Okay. Well, I don't know what those are, so why don't you?
Freudian slips, like whenever you accidentally make like a sexual innuendo that has to do with your mother or something like that, right?
That is super Freudian, but kinda, but not really.
Okay.
The Oedipus effect. That's good.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, that's like Oedipus and Freudian all combined in one. Yeah, let me see if I can find
Freudian
what I
slip, an unintentional error regarded as revealing subconscious feelings. Interesting. So like how when you're drunk you like lose like your like filter, and things that are like subconsciously like suppressed, they like come out, is that what you're meaning?
There's lots of reasons why it's done. I'm trying to find the example that I had. I can't believe I deleted it.
Ooh, okay. Actually, looking at this more, I kind of like this question. So it's kind of revealing your unconscious mind.
Yes, because that's what Freud is all about, the unconscious mind.
Yeah.
But it's like one of the primary examples is you meet a girl on Tinder, you think she's cute, you guys go out, or not even on Tinder, you meet a girl at the bar, you get there at 10 o'clock, you're chatting her up, nobody's there, you guys have a good time, 1:30 rolls around, because bars around here close at 2, right? And you've been drinking, you're slightly inebriated, but not bad, just to give your wits about you, and
all right.
Instead of hang on, I was trying to get my phrasing right. Instead like when she asks for your number, you're like, well, my number is sex18
Yeah.
322.
There you go. Okay.
And so like that's like the classic, because a lot of the stuff says it's all sexualized. So that's what Freud had in a lot of his theory.
Mm-hmm.
So he claims that all these slips have to do with sex, basically.
Arguably,
okay. So he argues our unconscious mind is only thinking about sex, and that's it.
mostly, yeah. If you know Freud at all.
Yeah, it's really interesting because like he talks about the ego and the superego, and then all of a sudden he just diverts to thinking that everybody thinks about sex, and like the Oedipus effect is all his thinking is that like there's a lot of boys who have weird sexual feelings about his mothers or about their mothers is what Freud thought. But then he somehow interwove that with the idea of the ego and the superego, which is like your conscious thoughts and your unconscious desires and such.
Nate, haven't most psychologists moved away from Freud now?
Yeah, I was actually looking online and trying to find like some relevant Freudian slip stuff, and we're going back at least 20, if not 30 years to find anything even remotely relevant
Yeah,
to
people don't
Freudian
really
slips.
follow his psychology anymore.
Freud is all about psychoanalysis, which is
Hmm.
like not really a thing anymore. Um, hang on, I gotta check myself because there's two different types: psychoanalysis and psycho something other.
I guess I thought anytime like you were doing I thought a psychologist, you know what I mean, was doing a psychoanalysis of a person. So I guess I misunderstood that. If that's not what they do today.
Yeah.
Well, I've come up with a really good what if question.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
I'm just really fascinated by this mind slip thing, because I feel like it. I wouldn't say. Yeah, I think a lot of Freud's uh, things are kind of outdated now, but it gets into the unconscious mind.
Yes,
And,
Freud is all about the unconscious, and it is psychoanalysis that he was big on. It's how your unconscious and your identity is developed by the age of like 3 or 4, unless something traumatic happens after that, and Oedipus complex, penis envy type stuff.
Was he like in his personal life, was he like known to be like a like womanizer and like a sex addict?
Yes, his
Okay, that
the
makes a lot of
majority
sense.
of his clients were affluent white women,
Hmm.
and he slept with a lot of them, as far as I can tell,
This makes a
or I
lot of
would guess.
sense. Yeah, okay. That makes sense. Okay, that's a very interesting topic.
We can have a whole long conversation about the subconscious. I love that.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I love
Me
it
too.
too. But for the sake of the podcast, let's keep
Mm-hmm.
let's keep it um very brief. But Tanya, you said you had a good question.
Yeah,
So you're up. What
I
is
think
it?
we have a good crowd for it today
Okay.
too.
Okay,
So,
great.
what if all religion was eliminated?
That was actually I had two other what if questions. One was I told Jared, what if there was absolute undeniable proof that there was no God, like undeniable proof, and there would
Mhm.
that's relative to people. The other one was what if all religion was eliminated and
Yeah,
outlawed?
basically, like something happened in everyone's brain where they no longer believed in any type of God.
Humanism, baby.
Oh man.
How would
Man,
the world progress? Would it be a good place, a bad place, a weird place,
I think
smarter place?
Humanism,
it would
socialism.
depend. Oh,
You
see, I
think
don't think
socialism would
so.
happen?
no, I
Does
don't
that
No
think that
happen,
would
way.
Nate?
happen. No.
No way.
Nope.
I think socialism would go down the drain as soon as that
It'd be
happened.
an empty socialism, man.
Yeah, that's my
The
thought.
idea of God, man. There are so many people I think that just have the idea of God. Maybe this sounds bad, but like just to feel secure and
Oh
and
yeah.
like for if I didn't believe in God and I wanted to say one of the reasons that God was made up is so that people like have a morality to base stuff on so that all hell didn't break loose and that chaos didn't break loose. You know what I mean? Like there's a bunch of people who don't think hell is real because they want people to have to be scared to act a certain way. And so I think that if you got rid of that, I don't believe that. I don't agree with that, obviously, but I do think that there are a fair amount of people that believe that and that would act out if God didn't exist. But it depends on what would make people believe God didn't exist anymore and like all religion
Yeah.
was outlawed. Like, do people not believe in God anymore, or is just religion outlawed?
That's
Yeah, I mean,
that's a good
I'd,
point.
it would have to get to the point where, for some reason, we'll do another one of these hypothetical magical situations where there was no religion anymore. Everyone just woke up and no one believed.
Like like they can't remember that they believed, or this all of,
No,
or
everyone,
everyone just came to the
everyone has
realization.
complete recognition of their entire life, but they
Okay.
just wake up like, oh, I don't believe in religion anymore. Like no one, not even the Pope. He's like, wow, my whole life was kind of wasted. I don't believe, and like religion just like fell apart, and like no one did it anymore.
I think initially it would just be incredible gluttony and like all about the self. Like people who are
You
like
really think
super.
so?
Yes, I think people who were super conservative because of their religion and they didn't indulge, and they finally realized that they didn't have to live by this code that they could do what they want, I 100% believe they would indulge all of their desires. 100%.
I'm to be honest with you, I disagree. I think in the thousands, tens of thousands of people I've met in my life, I've met a handful of people who control themselves based off of their religion. There's a lot of people that control themselves based off of other things, but
Yeah.
like for instance, I've met one person who's celibate until marriage, and
Just one though.
just one.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know. I haven't talked to
think-
everyone.
Yeah,
I don't know
you are
because
you're probably right just because of like the people that you surround yourself with, but I guarantee you in like your more conservative Arab countries, like, oh man, there'd be a lot of self
You mean in the Arab
stuff.
countries where they're like snatching up like 20, 30 different wives?
Yes.
Do you have any experience with the Arab countries, man?
I don't.
I was about to say the same thing. I was
But-
like,
Okay, maybe the women will. But true. Okay. So you think they will?
I think people inherently have a moral compass, and they're not just gonna.
I agree.
I don't believe in God. I'm just gonna eat everything I've never wanted to eat because I don't care about my health. I'm just gonna
If you look
suck
at like,
every dick I see and go down on every girl I see.
if you look at
and
like all
steal-
religions, like almost all of them, they've got a lot of things that run fluid through them all. And so like that tells me that regardless if any religion is right or wrong, humans have a moral compass that they want to follow, even though they don't know why they want to follow it.
That's a good logic there.
Yeah, it's true.
that it is. People who believe in religion would say that that comes from some type of intelligent design and that we're designed in that way. And some people would say that we're made in God's image. That's why I think, I don't know, man, you would see the world would look vastly different. I mean, vastly different because people would have to find something different to base who they are, to base reasoning, to base logic out of. Like people, I mean, even if there are a bunch of people who don't believe, there are still so many people in the world who have even a little bit of comfort in saying that, okay, I'm agnostic, but it's hard for me to believe this was all by chance. And so I believe in a God. So maybe when I die, it won't just be black, blackness forever. And I think that if you got rid of that idea and it, you know what I mean? Like people would have a hard time coming to terms with that. You know what I mean? I do think that there would be a lot of people that would off themselves. I think
there'd
that,
be definitely a period of time where things were, I don't want to say chaos, but it'd be really interesting. Like I don't know.
I think the world's population would be drastically reduced. But I do think that like the people that made it out on the other side would be I don't want to say the pinnacle of rationality, because at the same time, I think there'd be just as many people who, maybe not just as many, but I think there'd be a sizable amount that, are the pinnacle of like, life is meaningless. You know what I mean? Life is nothing. Like why? I think because like if you don't believe in a God, I don't think that you can really believe in an afterlife. And so I think maybe this is just me, but it's either like, okay, you think that like we're on this world just because of chance and we're on this world just to make the mark that we can until we're gone and then it's like, but what is the point? You know what I mean? Like what is the point? Like we make a mark, but then it doesn't matter. And I think eventually everyone would kind of I don't know.
I'm going to contradict you.
I would have to think about this for a long time. That's a great question.
Yeah, like a little anecdotal, like first from experience, people I've known who have gone from believers in religion to basically humanistic beliefs.
Yeah.
They have found another cause and, they want to do things that help humanity. Like humanism is kind of a religion, but it's more an ideology. Like I think that a lot of times people would just switch to some ideology because there's still
I agree. I definitely agree. Right.
To have, a belief system, a moral code. And so a lot of times you can just switch to an ideology. And a lot of times it's just like, oh, I want to help humanity. And, I may not be going to an afterlife, but my name might be in a history book, or I could pass on my traditions to my children, or I know that I could die at peace in my brain because I know I've done my best to help the human race.
There's so many books
that's so
out
true.
there
That's true.
that are just simply about improving yourself and improving everything around you so you leave the world a better place than when you entered it. There's so many book things and everything like that.
Do you think we would fear death more or less because we
I think
believe.
eventually we would learn to accept it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that's the
yeah.
natural process, and it started out as a natural process, and then we kind of assigned mysticality to it. This is coming from my own viewpoint, of course, but we assigned mysticality. I mean, even in the Christian. So, like, I'm not sure what your beliefs line up with, but hell wasn't originally part of the Christian dogma, from the research I've read, and then they assigned it later on after they got the Hades from the Greek culture. That's probably a hot topic.
Hell.
I mean, it was in the Old Testament, like Sheol, hell. I mean, it was in the Old Testament.
Well, yeah, and it depends on your denomination as well, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, because then it depends on what you believe. But like the Hebrew translation of Sheol is it's hell. You know what I mean? It's not the word hell, but it is hell. It is the place of suffering, and it's not just like hell on earth and a time of suffering. It is a place, if that makes any sense. So just from what I know. But I do know I agree with what you're saying. Anyway, I'll add to whatever we're talking about later.
That's a great question. Yeah, I don't know. I think there'd be a lot of chaos in the beginning, but eventually it would just we'd come to accept it as just a natural process. Would that give people more of a sense of urgency in their life, you think, because they know like this is it and I have to be
I think they
like
would
more?
In my opinion, I think they would respect life more.
Yeah, it's true.
But then again, you can argue the same viewpoint coming from a religious standpoint. You respect life because it's your God's creation and you want to, take care of it and shepherd it. So I'm curious a lot, about science and art specifically, because in the past, religion has kind of been the source from which art has come, and for a long time it was the source from which science came. But now it's switched. Do you think that we would see stagnation or growth in those two areas?
Have you ever read Atlas Shrugged?
Yes.
I think it would be very similar. I think that group would be, where the best of the best are there, and you have giant innovations in art and in science.
Without
for
politics
a while
or anything
anyway.
else getting in the way.
I think there would be a certain group. I think in some ways, because I think it wouldn't be a universal thing. I don't think, because I agree with what you're saying. I think since the beginning, people have had, some people based God as the sun, God as the water, God as lust, God as greed, and all these kinds of things. People have always attributed something to God, and so if we get rid of the idea of a God, then I think we would make ideas our God, and certain ideologues, would become our God, and certain ways of thinking would be, well, I follow this way of thinking, I follow this way of thinking, and this. I don't think it would. I think we would be still tribal as we are today, if not. Well, I don't know if we'd become more tribal like we were back in the past, but
here's a question.
But I do think that. Go for it.
How soon do you think it would take before that ideology, that magical night happened where everyone realized religion wasn't real, before some guy came around and was like, you know what, I can probably make money off this if I say that I've got the newest and only religion?
Well, it still depends on how people don't believe in God anymore either. Because like, if people are just like, well, from now on we will never believe in a God again, then that's not going to happen.
Yeah, it wouldn't happen in this scenario because people don't believe in a God. What I was thinking along those lines, Nate, is that instead of religion and a God, it'd be more of like, I don't have a better word, but a techno religion. Like, have you guys ever heard of dadaism?
No.
There's a couple new. There's not a good term for it now, but there's techno religions, and there's two different. One of the biggest ones, which is kind of scary, is called dadaism, and they believe that all data should be free. And these people go into like universities and they crack into their databases and release all the data because they think they almost hold data as holy, and they think that once all data is free and out there in the world, that there'll be like this sublime state of knowledge, basically.
Because everyone had truth. Dude, that's interesting. I do think, honestly, like, and I'm not super sold on the idea that this wouldn't even happen in our world today, but I do think that I think that digital consciousness would be a thing. I think that eventually we would get to a point where we can upload our consciousness to like, I don't know, a digital world almost, and that becomes the world because like we accept death, but I mean, if technology keeps advancing and if the idea of God goes away, and once you get through that time of turmoil and people come out on the other side as rational and just invest everything in technology, and you can get to a place where there is a data world and it becomes the main world, I think it's like, well, why would I die if I can just upload my consciousness to this? If that makes any sense. I do think that would be an inevitable outcome for that world if we came up with one without God. Because right now, religion would be in the way of that. It's like death is a natural part of the cycle that God made, and so when I die, I go to heaven. And so, if there is no special thing with death, it's just something that happens in nature. Then why can't I control nature and change it a little bit, and kind of bend the rules a bit and make this digital consciousness a thing? If that makes any sense.
Oh, it does. And I mean, there's limiting factors to that, but I think that is a very possible future. A distant future.
Yeah, distant.
But it's one of the two possibilities that I see.
Bob.
Bob.
So just to kind of clarify your statement, you would say that the biological would be changed to like the technological. So like we would no longer have a body, but like we would find some way to put our consciousness in like a machine, or like when you say digital world, is that what you mean?
Yeah,
have you read Ready Player One?
I have not, but that's like the same concept, right? Like you put yourself in the game, but correct me if I'm wrong, but you still have a body, right?
Yeah, and you still exist in the real world. That's just like super immersive VR. It's like there are like scientists in the world who believe that like we're in a computer simulation right now.
Yeah, they did a lot of numbers and like math, and they said that there's almost a 99% possibility that the life that we're living right now is actually just a simulation.
Right. And so just imagine that like you can upload your consciousness into not necessarily a simulation, but like something similar to a simulation, but this is the real deal. Like this is the world now. And like it's hard to get that concept. Like I can't verbalize that concept very well just because I don't know what it would look like, but there is a massive digital world that is like our world, and you can't just, change it, but that's what our consciousness is. It doesn't matter about our human bodies anymore. It's all about that consciousness.
Basically, it'd be like, so you take out every one of your neurons, you map the brain completely, and you get a bunch of data. And that data is what constitutes your consciousness. And we won't get into the whole idea of where your self is, but basically you upload all your memories and all your thoughts and your compartmentalized consciousness of your brain. And you upload that and you assign it an avatar to some type of digital world. And then that avatar can do
anything,
basically whatever it wants to, depending on the parameters of the world that it gets uploaded into.
Yeah.
And you could make it where when you could breed and it would just be an exchange of data, and the data would calculate itself, and that's how you would have a kid. I mean, have you ever heard of the show Black Mirror?
Yes, I've seen a couple episodes. It's cool.
There's like an episode that's kind of like this, where when people are dying, they can upload their consciousness, like a copy of their consciousness, to the cloud, and it's this cloud world. So when you die on Earth, your consciousness is still uploaded to this cloud. If you haven't seen it, Black Mirror it's like the Twilight Zone, where it's a bunch of what ifs. Where the Twilight Zone is like, what if this mystical thing happened? Black Mirror is like, what if this technological thing happened? And it's awesome because you can see it happening in our
world.
Like
a little bit of
semblance,
like, wow, that might be possible.
Yes.
Yeah,
and they're all like really dystopian, and they always end up like really twisted too. So
I think there's maybe 2 or 3 that end somewhat happy, but even then, they're like, I still don't know how to feel about that.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of episodes. I think I've seen like the first 3, and the first one like really sucks you in.
That has nothing to do with like the rest of the
pig.
series with the pig.
Oh my god, dude. I was laughing the entire time, and Megan's like, "This is fucked up." I'm like, "Yes, it is, but it's funny." But no, yeah, that's crazy. So like with this cloud world or this digital world, would it have to be like built? or like
Yeah, so like the thing about that, and I'll just say I mentioned limitations earlier.
Mhm.
There still has to be some type of real world maintenance. It has to have
Yeah.
servers and it has to have energy and it has to
Yeah.
have infrastructure.
Right.
It's the same reason why an AI revolution would never happen because
Well,
the incredible
wouldn't the AI just do all the maintenance? Like we would just make a bunch of robots, and then they would like
yeah, okay, so
maintain this
you
server.
say just make a bunch of robots like it just snaps its fingers and
Sure.
robots are made.
Sure.
So it has to come up with designs for robots. It has to get all the supplies for robots. And a lot of times the
Yeah.
supplies for robots are spread all over the globe. So it has to
Yeah.
drive the ships, and the planes, and the cars and the trucks. It has to build
Bob did it.
to get them all to all the factories. Like this isn't something that's just going to happen.
Sure. Yeah. So there's always going to be some human elements that we're never just going to all become machines.
Well, I mean, it's possible. As soon as we start becoming a higher type class civilization, we can harness more of the sun, or if we have nuclear power. Like a nuclear power system can last for thousands of years, and they wouldn't really need much maintenance once you built it. But that's far future stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, and robots are today.
What? We're in the infancy of robotics.
We're in the fetus stage of robotics, if that.
Jared, have you read the Bob books?
I have not. No.
There's
They're good.
another
It's a
good
good
one for
series.
you.
I'll have to do that. Oh man.
Do you think it is more likely that we'll go towards a completely technological future where everything's just computing and eventually uploading our consciousness into virtual realities, or do you think that we'll go into more of like a genetic type of future where we just edit our genes, we entwine ourselves with more
What a great question.
like is it like Android or is it like what's the
Like augmentation?
Cyborg.
augmentation? Yeah, cyborg or Android.
Yeah.
Like do we augment ourselves and we like increase our genes so we're super strong, super smart, and we also like tie ourselves in really well with nature and we learn how to genetically modify everything and like super strong like spider silk cut stuff because nature's been engineering for millions of years, so it has all this strong stuff, and if we could tap into the genetics behind it, that's also a huge technological future that we could have.
That's
I
like a
think they'll go
huge
one of those two
argument
routes.
That's a good point.
because you're seeing this huge technological advance, but at the same time, you're seeing a strong push to get all the GMOs and stuff like that out of our foods or whatever, and all natural this, all natural that, and all this other stuff. So I think there's like two main camps with that.
But that's just as far as food goes.
Yeah.
Like every other thing is someone's breathing into their mic really hard. I mean, as far as like engineering, we're looking more and more to nature. As far as medicine goes, we're getting really involved into genetic modification.
I think the reality that you just outlined, I think, is more realistic. I don't think we'll go to completely digital consciousness, but a mix. So, like, say you lost your hand in an accident, you could just go to Home Depot and buy a hand. It'd be really expensive, but or like, say your vision was going bad and like you needed an eye, you could go and buy an eye. Whether that was a machine or whether that was biological, I feel like it's gonna be a mix of like robotics and biology, because technically, I don't think we're flesh, we're meat, right? So how do we make that into better? We just I feel like genetics is the future.
But look at like, all right, it's a tough debate because you could do a lot with genetics. Look at the strongest animals, but then you say, well, look at like construction equipment. We could be just as strong technologically as we could genetically.
Yeah, it's melding the biological with the machine. That's, I feel like, will make like the perfect human, I guess you could say. But I don't think it's one or the other. I think could be a mixture. I think that's where we're headed. It's just an observation. I don't have any facts to back that up, but logically it makes sense to me.
I don't know, man. With like the idea, do you know anything about the blockchain? Like, do you know anything about that? I just feel like with the blockchain, man, like data is becoming so important, and the way that we think of data is just, it's so different than we used to. Like, data as a key is becoming so much more of an idea than, data as just, information, if that makes sense. Or information itself is becoming a key or a lock or a switch or that can control something physical. And so I don't know. I feel like that's such a great question. Like, more an augmented, bio augmentation kind of future, or a data thing. I think it'd be something really in between. And I don't know what it would end up being. I still feel like the data thing would end up being, but it would depend on what we find out as we start augmenting ourselves and we start kind of becoming more one with the earth. Maybe not even one with it, but like when we can start controlling the earth a little bit more. If that makes sense, like you're talking about, like spider silk and that kind of thing.
Data and genes are basically the same thing. They're just strings of information.
Right. And that's what I was thinking. Like, what if, that's what I was thinking. Like, what if our data becomes like the blockchain? What if our data, like our DNA, is like a blockchain of itself? You know what I mean? And what if somehow the two are interwoven? And it's such a weird idea, but I don't know. I guess the idea of the blockchain reminds me of DNA, like you said. And so I don't know. That's like a super awesome thought-provoking question.
Imagine you just have a blockchain, and then you have a 3D printer just packed full of amino acids, and then you can manipulate that data any way you want and just outprint any type of biological organism.
That's amazing.
Right.
Danny,
am I the only one that didn't hear that?
I didn't.
No, I didn't hear you either. Sorry.
He was very robot-y. That's kind of punny.
Yeah.
He started the revolution.
He started the revolution. Now he's typing.
I heard something about original thought. I wasn't really sure.
Yeah, I think he said. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nate.
Here we go.
Do you think that there's such thing as an original thought? Maybe.
Oh, absolutely.
But I could be wrong. He was being very robot-y, but.
Do you guys think that there's original thought?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
There are a bunch of stuff about that, but for sure.
Surely that wasn't his question.
Yeah.
What do you think, Nate? Can you repeat your question?
He's trying.
Yeah, I think he's
typing right now. Let's see what he's got to say. We got a listener typing in a question right now.
Oh man. No, yeah, I think original thoughts are like the point of us.
I feel like I had original thought the other day. Original thought. Okay, so that was a question. I feel like I had an original thought. I mean, you can never really validate whether or not it was, but
yeah, it's true.
I had this really interesting thought about God the other day.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I thought that, and we don't have to talk about it too much, but I was hiking one day and I was just kind of contemplating God, the Christian God, and the Trinity, and I was thinking, what if the original God was actually just one person instead of a Trinity, but he had multiple personality disorder, and like he was like fighting with his like evil side, or like like maybe there's 4 personalities, he's fighting with one of them, and then that was the casting out of that
disorder.
Yeah.
It's possible. I mean,
I went way more in depth with it because Ryan and I had a conversation for like a couple hours about it.
The whole definition of the Trinity is one God, 3 persons, or 3 different, personalities, I guess you could say. So entities, yeah. So it's hard to wrap your brain around, but
still one God.
He was like like everything that he's made has been like part of him, and like even Satan was part of his consciousness because you can't really create something that you can't fathom.
It's true.
Yeah, and then like he was kind of cast that part out of him, but it was part of him, but he like doesn't lay claim to it anymore.
I see what you're going with.
Let's talk about the collective mind and all dissociative disorder, not multiple personality. Oh, yeah, even your psychology terms, dissociative.
Yeah.
Dissociative disorder. Yeah, I forgot that multiple personality isn't like even thought to be a thing anymore, like schizophrenia.
Yeah, it's not. So multiple personality disorder doesn't exist, I guess, or they're claiming it doesn't.
That's the current thought. Oh, that's the current thought.
Okay. Well, guys, I wasn't sure how this was gonna go, but I think
it went better than.
I think it went very well because It led into multiple other debates. But we're actually gonna cut it off here. I just want to thank you guys for coming on. And if you are watching, leave a comment with your what if questions, and maybe we can discuss it in at the beginning of the next episode and stuff like that. But other than that, guys, was there anything else that you guys wanted to say before we sign out of here?
No, I'm pretty good. I mean, I think that went over really well. I liked a lot of our questions. I'm definitely intrigued on talking about subconscious mind and all the other mysteries of the mind.
Yeah, I really look forward to maybe a psychology episode, maybe, and even that's so hard to do, just on basis of psychology, but like Danny was saying, the consciousness and the unconscious mind, but even just talking about like the way the different psychologists view the unconscious mind, like Jung versus Freud, and that kind of thing. But
Talk
yeah,
about the
great
different
talking.
way that religions view the mind.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm down for that. The mind, that could be a great episode.
The mind. Okay. Well, I think that's all. And guys, thank you so much for listening and watching. And this has been another episode of Trivial Objections.